All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. To my regular listeners, you already know how I get down. I have nothing but the best to provide, whether it's myself as a solo episode or the guest that I bring on. We provide you nothing but the best. And today, I am super excited to introduce you to this next guest. I mean, listen, I just about a year ago, I actually wrote an article that was about comparing Amazon to Target, and I talked about how, instead of waiting in those long lines, Amazon has been able to buck the system. And at me teaching at a school, I'd see boxes and boxes of Amazon, materials and products coming from the store. And today I have a gentleman that I didn't even know this existed, but he wrote a book that actually documents Jeff Bezos' letters to shareholders. All right. So Mr. Steve Anderson, welcome to the show. And like you said, we could just start it right there. First of
We'll
all,
start it right there. Aswan, thank you for having me. I'm looking
right.
forward to our conversation.
Now, how does one, first of all, have the idea and even think of doing something? And then how do you get access to those letters? And then furthermore, you have to actually having a book that's written that's called, it's the 12 letters from Jeff Bezos, correct?
Yeah, well, the book title is The Bezos Letters,
Steve Bezos, yeah, that's it, yeah.
14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon.
Yes. So
So,
yeah, go, man. I am.
okay, so
I just want to hear all about it.
how do I say this? It was a surprise to me also. So, a little background, I'm in a bit, my career has been in the insurance industry. Last 30 years doing consulting for insurance agents on technology. So helping them with all the technology changes and stuff going on.
Hmm.
Kind of through that, I started asking the question, is the biggest risk business face actually not taking enough risk? And coming out of the insurance industry, that's really counterintuitive.
Hmm.
Like, of course, insurance is to get rid of risk, mitigate risk, transfer risk, right? Not embrace risk.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you. Like, just a question around risk when you're selling insurance. It would seem that you would want people to not take as many risks, but you kind of took an opposite approach of it.
I took an opposite view mainly because as I looked at technology developing,
Hmm.
literally over the last 30 plus years, probably longer now, um, I realized that technology's change and pace of change has increased significantly.
Hmm.
And businesses in the past could spend a few years figuring out if a new technology was worth it, whether they should do something with it. In today's world, and it's been this way for probably 10 or 15 years, they just don't have the time not to do something. So
Hmm.
the risk of not doing something has increased, and the
Hmm.
risk of actually doing something is still there. But the faster you are able to move and adapt and change and embrace technology, I think the better off you are as a company.
Hmm.
And I have to say, that doesn't mean you do stupid things.
Hmm.
It has to be intentional and strategic. And we can talk more about how Amazon thinks about that.
Right.
So I started researching companies, taking a look at companies that were once very successful, and a lot of names we know, right? A Kodak, a BlackBerry, a Blockbuster, Borders Bookstore, Sears,
Hmm.
Kmart. I mean, in a lot of different industries, once very successful, no longer here. What happened? And companies that have been successful and continue to be successful.
Right.
And what's the difference between those companies and the ones that are gone? And
Exactly.
so that whole thought process started kind of my research.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of, I say obviously now, but came across Amazon as an example of a company that has been successful and really does continue to be successful,
Right.
continues to, you know, invent entire new industries, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so what? And kind of trying to figure out what's the difference. I came across the shareholder letters, and I
Hmm.
had read one or two over the years, but I realized that at the time I started doing this, I think there were probably 20 letters, 21 letters. So the first letter was 1997. The book goes through the 2018 letter. Bezos subsequently wrote 2019 and 2020, so two more. But what I realized in reading those letters as a narrative, not individually, but I literally spent a couple of days and read through them multiple times. I realized there were threads going through the letters. And those threads were how Bezos thought, how he built Amazon to do and to grow. Now, lots of CEOs write shareholder letters, but most of them talk about what the business did, how good they were. Bezos did some of that, no question. But he also did how did they do it? What was the thinking? What was the process they used to get to where they are today? So that's and literally that my first iteration of the book was a PDF, what I called a white paper, 1 page per letter at the time, kind of highlights of key points in the letter, some key quotes, and some takeaways. Well, fortunately, my wife, who's a co-author of the book, is in the book publishing business. So I showed it to her. She showed it to her founder of the publishing company she works for, and they both immediately came back and said, this is a book. And so that started really about an 18-month process of actually kind of taking that idea of the white paper and putting it into the book that was actually published.
Yeah, and there's a couple of takeaways that the listeners really need to take away from that. Is first of all, you started asking a question. All right, I really want to, like, when you were in this insurance world, was there some sort of like a level of frustration? Did it become monotonous? Did it become a situation where you just started asking a question because you saw trends that were happening where people are taking they're not being risky enough? Like what was really that thing that sparked that question?
Well, I sort of have said for a long time, in the insurance industry, they are not known for being, innovative and inventive and forward thinking and early adopters. They're late adopters, and there's a reason for that. They have to be really careful with people's money, the premiums. They have to be there when a claim happens, and a lot of regulatory around that. So there's some reasons for that, but that really was, hey, technology is going faster.
Right.
You can't continue just to sit back and do things the way you have done them. Customers are changing. Amazon's a big reason for that. Customer expectations are changing. Yeah, you don't sell books, but customers' expectations of service, response time, all those kinds of things are changing. And if you're not looking at that for your customers, they're going to go somewhere else that does serve their needs. So absolutely, comes out of the industry I was in.
Right. So as you're going through the research and you're reading all these letters, and one of the things I've always admired about Amazon is the relationship that they do have with an audience and the way they've been able to build an audience and just the filling a need. Like I was telling you with the article before, I'm not waiting, 50 minutes in a Target line anymore when I can look up on my app, look on my phone, get something from Amazon, and it's there at my front door within the next day. What did they sort of do in the letters? Like, what were you reading throughout the letters when it comes to the principles in the book that made it so you knew that they're forward thinking like that? How the question really is, how were they able to get ahead of the game as opposed to, like you mentioned, Blockbuster, another article I wrote about Blockbuster, Border, these places where you usually have to go in, pick up these products. What is it? Where did the secret sauce come from? Because I'm dying to know, and I know several listeners are dying to know that myself, because we all have to adapt, just like you said.
Right.
All of us have to adapt. If you're not taking your business, putting it online, giving some sort of an online feature to it, you're dinosaurs. You are a dinosaur, and you will not last. So go.
Yeah. So I would say, the very first letter, so Amazon went public in 1997, founded in 1994, had a few years there of growth. And in the 1997 letter, Bezos lays out kind of really three main sections in that first letter. One section was customer obsession. So what he said was, we will obsess over customers.
Mm,
And that caught my attention because obsess is such an interesting word.
yeah.
Because businesses think, you know, we have good customer service, or, we follow the customer journey,
Right.
or we focus on customers. But obsession has a different level of attention,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and it can be negative. And I think that's part of that tension that happens, because people say you're too obsessed,
Yeah.
right? So
It's
that's sort
always
of the
used
negative.
in a negative connotation.
Yeah. And for Bezos, that's foundational at Amazon. And the customer obsession is, we will know customers' wants, needs, and desires so deeply
Mm-hmm.
and so intimately that we can invent on their behalf. And so that's in that very first 97 letter. That was one section. Another section was long-term thinking. So customer obsession is one of my principles.
Yes.
Long-term thinking is another principle, where Bezos said, we will think long-term, not short-term.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning most companies, especially public, think quarterly. Am I hitting my quarterly earnings numbers?
Yeah, and
Bezos said, we're
that's what
not
I'm
going to do
saying.
that.
And I don't mean to, I know you got another.
No, go ahead.
That's
Interrupt me anytime.
when it comes to that though, and this is the part that really kind of it amazes me, is because most of those, when you go public and you have shareholders, they just want dollars and cents.
Yes.
They want money. They put their money into some, and when they read a letter, they're like, look, what are my earnings? How am I getting it? Should I take my money out? Should I put more in? They just want to hear the numbers, the ROI. So how was it that the fact that he's bringing up the customer obsession, the fact that he's bringing up how happy his customers are, how was that able to translate into dollars and cents to like these stiff shareholders that care about their bottom line?
So what he said when he talked about long-term thinking
Right.
is, he said, if you're an investor who wants immediate return, don't buy our stock.
Hey, I love it. I love
I mean,
it.
literally, what are most people doing? Buy our stock, buy our stock.
Yeah.
We'll pay dividends. Amazon's never paid a dividend,
Oh man.
never paid a dividend. But he
Wow.
said, long term, we are going to reinvest any profits we have back into the company.
Yes.
And literally for the first probably 10 or 15 years, that's what they did.
Oh,
And
that is.
and look at what happens with long-term thinking. Think of it today.
Mm-hmm.
When can you get a package from Amazon? You click buy.
Yes.
2 days, maybe a little longer occasionally,
Right.
but more and more often, hours or one day,
Yeah.
right? Because they reinvested and developed their logistics network,
Yeah.
fulfillment centers, sortation centers, transportation, right? All of that, huge investment, but it's
Mm-hmm.
paying off now.
Yeah.
And again, their stock continued to grow. It split 20 to 1. I mean, the results are saying that was a good way to address it. But he told shareholders, if you are in and out, if you're one of those investors, we are not the stock for you. And that was fascinating to me, right?
Yes.
To be realistic to shareholders.
Yes, and it takes me, I have a football playing background. I have a background in sports. And the greatest coaches I played for, the undefeated teams, the coaches that actually make a dent in this business, that are worth a damn in this business, they say the same thing. They say the exact same thing to a parent. They say the exact same thing to a player. If you think you're just going to walk on here and get a scholarship, don't come here. If you think you're just going to start, don't come here. I'm telling you right now, we have a filter. We have situations where you have got to be good enough, and we have a specific type. Listeners that are tuning into this right now, the way that translates into your world, you have got to start to establish some boundaries. You got to establish some boundaries for yourself. Don't just take money from anybody. Focus on your bottom line. Figure out who your avatar is. Serve the avatar. Serve the avatar. Serve the avatar. If the avatar is not the person that you are speaking with, you got to tell them to keep moving. You have to be courageous enough to keep moving, because I could only imagine somebody who's talking to billionaire shareholders and telling them, look, I don't want your money. Like that,
Right.
that's a ballsy thing to do. So, with that, you were going to say the third principle. So go ahead.
And the third was around employees, kind of section.
Yeah,
Um,
it's Meyer. I like it. Yeah.
and he said, in order for us to achieve, we're going to have good employees.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's really funny because, again, he set the criteria for employees, and he said, we're a hard place to work. We
Mm-hmm.
have high demand, exacting standards. We don't compromise. And so if you come to work here, one, we look for A players.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say this. This is my interpretation of what he said.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for the best,
Yeah.
and we will need the best in order for us to achieve what I see us achieving. And so those are kind of three main sections. Now, here's what's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That 97 letter, and he ends in the letter, he ends with, this is day one for the internet. And again, this is 97, early on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
People didn't understand what it was going to become.
Right.
He said, day one for the internet and for Amazon.com if we execute well. And again, that's part long-term thinking.
Right.
That's part, the day one mentality, something else we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But he set the standard. And every subsequent letter he wrote, he attached a copy of the 97 letter.
Oh, wow. So they're seeing
So
that.
even the 2020 letter, he says, as is my custom, I attach a copy of the original 1997 letter to
Oh,
remind people,
man.
here's what we set out to be. These things haven't changed,
Yeah.
and we're still focusing on these.
All right. So on that note with employees now, though, because that brings me to the next place I want to get you, is when it comes to how we see Amazon set up now, where you get influencers, you get people that are now able to sell their own products, create their own shop. They become kind of partners with Amazon. When did that process start to develop? Because like you said, the logistics side is on point. He needs to make sure things are getting where they need to get to on time. But now you can come up with like, I'm actually published all my books through Amazon KDP, and I get an Amazon check. So, when it comes to how he was able to open up the doors for all these affiliate links and affiliates and things like that, when did that start happening?
So it started happening in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're describing the marketplace.
Right.
That actually was the third iteration. So when we talk about risk taking,
Yeah.
they tried two different ways to bring third parties in. Now first, let's address the elephant and I don't know if it's elephant, but the big issue. It's a crazy idea. Who in their right mind, what business in their right mind invites their competitors onto their platform? Crazy,
Yeah,
right?
you're getting from other bookstores. Yeah, I actually remember. I remember buying my first Amazon book. I was in high school, actually. I lost my textbook, and I asked my teacher where I get one, and then she says Amazon.com. I get it, and I realized, did this come from another bookstore that I bought it from Amazon? So
Yeah.
I never even actually thought about it like that when it
Yeah.
comes to how we created it, right?
So, but so that's a crazy idea, very counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say even now, you talked about Target, I'll add Walmart to that discussion. They didn't do anything for a long time. Now they're both trying to create third-party platforms or access on
Right.
their websites, right? But here's what Bezos said. If a third-party seller has a product in inventory that we don't have, it's better for the customer. If they have a price that's lower than what we can offer, it's better for the customer. And if it's better for the customer, it'll ultimately be better for Amazon.
He stayed locked in on the customer.
Yes.
Locked in on the customer. I got you.
And Amazon has spent literally billions and billions of dollars developing that logistics network.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've turned it into a business.
Yeah.
So they charge their third-party sellers for storing their inventory, for shipping their inventory, and then they don't have to build a website.
Yeah.
They don't have to build warehouses. They don't have to build transportation and trucking.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon built that for them. Well, built that, and they can tap into it, and they get charged for that. Now, some people are, and it really kind of surprised, if it's interesting to me, some people are complaining they're charging too much. Well, you don't have to use it. Go
Right.
build your own.
Go build your own, right?
If you think, I mean, and maybe they do or don't, I don't know.
Right.
And you could do it yourself. Don't use Amazon. If you think they're charging too much, go figure out something else.
Right.
The problem is it's so easy to use
Yes.
Amazon.
You just said the word efficiency. I mean, just the other day, I was in a Whole Foods and they say, look, you got Amazon Prime, took one of these things out here, boom, pop it up, I paid for
Pop it up, discount.
and get your
Well, and I've
you
even started using Amazon One,
Mm-hmm.
which is your Palm to pay.
Yes, yeah, that's
right?
it.
And again, you look at all these different things,
Mhm.
what do they have in common? It's making the customer experience
That much.
easier,
Right.
less friction, and so they buy more.
Mhm.
That's what they're in business for.
And they become trusted, and I love I love the way they really utilize the partnerships, because again, this show's all about innovative teamwork, and I've learned so much from them. But I do want to make sure we mention this before I let you go. Is there was failures. There was a lot of failures, and do business owners look at an Amazon? They look at the success, they see the finished product, and they say, "Okay, look, that's going to be me." And they don't understand. I think you had mentioned something about how they tried to do a phone and all that. So if you can just go in a little bit about some of the failures that they've had as a company and how they bounce back from that, it'll be really helpful.
Okay, so let's continue on the marketplace. So the
Mhm.
marketplace was the third iteration. So they had what they called Z, the letter Z shops, and it was a separate place on the website. And as a customer, you had to log in there in order to access the third-party sellers. Nobody wanted more friction, right? We didn't want to do that. So that was a failure. So they tried a couple iterations before they got to marketplace. And marketplace, really what it did was put third-party sellers literally side by side with Amazon products. So that was the success, and it's 65% of Amazon sales are through third-party sellers.
Yes.
So again, big success over time. Let's talk about the phone.
Yeah.
So
the phone was
most people don't remember that Amazon built a phone because it was an utter failure. So 2014, Jeff Bezos got on a stage in New York City, announced the Fire phone. And it basically was a phone to shop on Amazon. Well, and I don't know what Bezos was thinking. It was his pet project. He wanted this phone. And we already had the iPhone. We already had Android. People had picked what camp they're in.
Yep.
Were they going to give up what they had picked for this new Amazon phone that really was an okay phone? Maybe it was a little easier to shop on Amazon, but I'm not going to have a separate phone to shop on Amazon.
Right.
It's not going to happen. So at one point, they lowered the price, the contract price. So the contract was AT&T. They lowered the contract price to 99 cents. Couldn't give them away.
Didn't even give away the phone.
End of 2014, they wrote off in inventory and development costs $180 million. So big failure. Amazon was bigger at the time, so you could argue they could absorb it.
Right.
That's the failure. And you see that a lot at Amazon. Whenever you see Amazon shutting something down, that means they see it as a failure, at least initially. Now, with the phone, they had developed expertise in voice processing because you had to with the phone.
Right.
4 months after the announcement of the Fire Phone, Bezos got his first demonstration for a cylinder that could sit on your table and you could talk to it and it would respond to you.
Hmm.
Everything they learned about voice processing in the phone,
Right.
they were able to transfer and improve and enhance into the Amazon Echo and
Echo.
Alexa, the machine learning software that allowed the voice processing to actually do something.
Wow.
That has become a big success.
That's it. And it's so important that you guys understand you have to take action. You will fail. It's going to happen. I've spoken to you guys on multiple occasions about the countless failures I've had personally, but you gotta fail, and those failures are going to lead to something major if you really actually took action in it. But you cannot be afraid to fail.
And let me also say, at the same time, it's not stupid failure.
Right.
It's not, let's throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks.
Right. Right.
It's intentional, it's strategic, and
Mm.
you actually work at trying to prevent failure.
Right.
But the way Bezos thinks about it is we need to experiment. And an experiment means you could fail. If
Mhm.
you know you're not going to fail, it's not an experiment. You can experiment, which allows you to invent, which then gives you the opportunity to innovate. And so I actually think there's so much out there on businesses and innovation. They need to innovate. They need to innovate.
Right. Right.
I think that's backward thinking. They need to invent
Hmm.
so they can innovate. And if you're going to invent, you need to experiment and you need to fail. And so one of my principles is encourage successful failure. And those are all examples of that. But let me give you, if I may,
Yeah. Good.
one of the tools Amazon uses to try and prevent failure. And it's currently called the working backward document. When it originally came about, it was called the 6-page memo. So the background is in 2004, Bezos sent an email to senior leadership team, about 16 people, the top level team at Amazon.
Right.
And Bezos said, no longer will PowerPoint or keynote presentations be allowed in our meetings. And their meetings are, people are pitching ideas, they want funding, they want research dollars, I mean, all of that. So they're the top level decision makers.
Right.
No more PowerPoint. In its place, people pitching the idea will be required to write a physical memo, 6-page max. So constraints
Hmm.
and writing. And I think one of the reasons the letters resonated with me so much is Bezos is a very good writer.
Hmm.
He's good at expressing thoughts. He's good at putting in words. And what he said subsequently is people hide behind PowerPoint. They don't fully develop their thoughts. It's easy to do a bullet point.
Yes, it
It's
is.
harder to do 3 or 4 paragraphs.
Yeah.
And so it forces people to think deeper about the project and about what they want to accomplish and about the problems that they're going to encounter. And so
Right.
the structure of the memo, first page is what's called a future press release. So you actually write the press release for the day that your product, platform, whatever it is you're pitching is going to be released to the customer.
Hmm.
And what's the customer going to think about this? What's going to resonate with them?
Hmm.
And then there's FAQs. FAQs are all the questions you anticipate that senior team will ask. And then you answer the question. Here's the question, here's the answer.
Hmm.
And then you might have some data to support your conclusions. And you don't send that out before the meeting. So you go into the meeting, everybody's there, you hand out a physical copy of the memo, And
Mhm.
you spend the first 10, 15, 30 minutes, everybody reading the memo like you're in study hall. Because what Bezos said, executives are busy. They'll say they're going to read it, but they won't.
They
They
won't.
might skim it, but they're not going to read it. So we'll spend the first X minutes reading it together. So we're literally on the same page.
Yes. And
Now,
yeah, so it
let
forces
me,
people
one other comment here. Employees talking about this process, he said, new employees coming into Amazon have the hardest time adapting to this process, right? Because it's different, unique.
Yeah.
And employees say, when you are in that room and people are reading, and then you open it up for discussion, it's magical. Because now you don't have to go through everything. People aren't interrupting you at a slide that 3 slides down you're going to explain. Everybody's on the same page. Now it's a deeper discussion. How did you get to this conclusion? What about this question? What about, et cetera? And you get to a decision faster. It's the whole idea of slowing down to speed up.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's important that they're on the same page because
Yeah.
they're responsible for there's so many people, and the logistics and the reputation of the company, it is all gonna be falling on Jeff Bezos. So I love that. It gives me an idea, especially with the school I'm at now. It gives me an to make sure folks are staying on the same page. So
Yeah.
I do want to be very respectful of your time. So can you just tell people, how they can get in touch with you? Actually, first of all, like what's next? How they can get in touch with them? What's next? What's coming down the pipeline for Mr. Steve Anderson?
So actually what's next is the book's almost 5 years old. So I'm actually working through an edit of updating information. So
Okay.
I don't exactly know what that means yet. It might be a second edition, but there's some publishing kind of technical requirements for calling it a second edition, but it will be an updated version with updated information. So I don't know yet a time, but I'm working on that right now.
I got you.
People can find out more about the book at thebezosletters.com. And you can connect with me there. So Steve at thebezosletters.com or on LinkedIn. That's my primary social platform. And Steve Anderson, either Bezos or Steve Anderson Insurance. If you want to connect with me there, tell me you heard me on this podcast, and I'll be glad to connect with you.
Great. Now, what I do to close out all my shows, Steve, is I want you to use your imagination. You're in this insurance job, you're kind of bogged down, you're seeing some problems, you're seeing some things that aren't right. And that young man, that young person that you were back then comes into the Zoom room right now. Pretend he's here. Just give him some words of encouragement of what his future self, his future life is going to be like, and we'll officially close.
I kind of go to Seth Godin's thought of
Man, I love that guy. Perfect
don't
out.
wait for permission.
Yeah.
Don't wait for permission. And write. I mean, I literally my career I've written articles, I've written, blog posts, obviously the book. But I found for me, the best way to crystallize what I think is to write. And that's, I think, why I resonated with the 6-page memo so much.
Yeah.
Is it really does help you think through. I don't know what I think often until I write. And so don't wait for permission, do it and write.
Amen to that. Amen to that. A capital 1000%. All right. Fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.